presses. Stop the presses. Or at least stop the computer thingy that makes the teleprompter go. There was good news today for an Obama administration nominee, and I haven't been able to say that in a long time. Specifically, it was for one celebrated Iraq war vet, an experienced veterans advocate and administrator named Tammy Duckworth. Her nomination to the Department of Veterans Affairs, I'm happy to say, is no longer being inexplicably held up by North Carolina Republican Senator Richard Burr. Senator Burr consistently said only that he was delaying a vote on Duckworth's nomination to do his, quote, due diligence. But today, the senator's office relented. Still not clear on what the due diligence was on a decorated helicopter pilot, double amputee, experienced veterans advocate supported by all the veteran service organizations and nationally known for her work. But it's done at last. However, this apparently does not signal smoother sailing for the rest of the high-level nominations that are still stuck in the Senate. Take the issue of Iraq, for instance, where the president was today. He met with the troops, the top U.S. military commander in Iraq, the Iraqi prime minister, and then he left. I mean, there might have been another meeting with the U.S. ambassador to Iraq, but we still don't have one. Ryan Crocker, the Bush-appointed ambassador, left Iraq in mid-February, and President Obama's nominee to replace him, one of the most experienced foreign service officers anywhere, Christopher Hill, he can't take over the job until Senate Republicans, chiefly Sam Brownback of Kansas, stop blocking the vote on his nomination. Senate resistance is also thus far costing the country a head of the Office of Legal Counsel and a top lawyer for the State Department. Couple all these blocked high-level nominations with 0 Republican votes on the budget that just passed, and with the number of bills on which the Republicans are insisting that the threshold for passage is 60 votes and not 50, and you get a numerically illustrative portrait of Republican strategy for their time in the minority. Of course, you also get a numerically illustrative portrait of a very changed America, one in which a majority vote doesn't pass legislation through our government anymore. How did that happen? Joining us now is Senator Chuck Schumer, Democrat of New York. He sits on the Judiciary, Finance, and Banking Committees and chairs the Senate Rules Committee. Senator Schumer, thank you so much for coming in. It's nice to see you.
Good evening. Great to be here.
Thanks. On the issue of nominees,
yes,
should Republicans be paying a bigger political and public relations price for holding up these nominees, or is this sort of business as usual?
No, it's really not business as usual. I mean, there's always been this filibuster rule. But they have just used it for everything. They began last year when we only had 51 votes. Of course, it was much harder. They even blocked something called the Highway Technical Corrections Bill. You know, if the highway number was supposed to be 684 and it said 685, they blocked that. And I think the reason is simple. They have nothing positive to say. The world has changed. The old Reagan philosophy, which, you know, served them well politically from 1980 to about 2004, 2006, is over. But the hard right, which still believes when the federal government moves, chop off its hands, still believes, you know, the traditional values kind of arguments and strong foreign policy, all that's over. So they have nothing other than to say no. And the good news for us, I'll make 2 points here. The good news for us is the polls show that the Republican Party in the House and Senate is at the lowest ratings they've had in a long time, while Democrats are pretty high, so this no strategy clearly isn't working with the public. And I think President Obama has a pretty smart strategy. He's going to talk bipartisanship to the American people, but realizes that until the Republican grassroots pushes their people over, if that ever happens, we're not going to get change in the House and Senate. So the answer is 60 votes.
Well, I look at that, though. I look at the number of cloture votes that they've forced, that this assumption that 60 votes is normal now, and I worry that that's not what I learned on Schoolhouse Rock. That's not the way that I think this is supposed to work. No. I mean, you are the chair of the Senate Rules Committee, and I don't know if that's the right place where this should go, but is there some sort of anti-filibuster abuse rule that could be pushed?
Well, here's the problem, and this is sort of a catch-22 that dates from the days of the old Southern Democratic barons. You need 2/3 of the Senate to change any Senate rule. That's 67. That's even worse than 60. And so that was that makes it almost impossible to change the rules, except if public opinion forces them to change. Now, you know, there are 3 probably Republican moderates in the Senate. Moderate. Specter and Collins and Snow from Maine. There are about 30 hard right guys. They just believe in that hard right philosophy. They're not changing. But there are 10 or 12 what you'd call mainstream conservatives. People like Dick Lugar, who supports Chris Hill, for instance, people like Lamar Alexander or George Voinovich. And the question is, are they going to continue to march totally in line with the hard right, even though I think in their hearts a lot of them know it's wrong, or are they going to break on occasional issues? The president is going to keep talking bipartisanship to the American people in hopes that it moves some of them.
Why not use the budget reconciliation rules for more legislation, even though that's not precedent, because the Republicans have broken the precedent by invoking filibuster so often?
I think that's the direction we're going to move in, and I would support that. I know that we're certainly going to give Senator Baucus, Senator Conrad a chance to pass health care legislation with 60 votes. But it would be my view that if they can't do that by a certain time, August or so, we then move to reconciliation where we need 51, and it's going to be hard enough to pass national health care with 51 votes.
Sure. In the contested Minnesota Senate race, thinking about the size of the majority,
yes.
You called today for Norm Coleman to concede. When do you think this ends?
Well, here's what Norm Coleman does. He keeps contesting different parts of the election and keeps losing votes. The count today, Al Franken gained, I believe it was, well, he's up to 315 votes. He was at 225 and then 250. So Coleman ought to realize that he is not going to win this election. Here's the key. He does have a right, Coleman does, to go to the Minnesota Supreme Court. My view, the Minnesota Supreme Court has rejected his arguments 4 times already. This will be the last time. And then is the key issue. The law requires both the governor and secretary of state to sign the certification that Al Franken is senator. The secretary of state has said he would. Governor Pawlenty says he would follow the law, but he hasn't said explicitly he should. The people of Minnesota certainly want him to sign and get a senator already. And poor Al Franken, he's been through, they've read and reread and challenged and re-challenged vote after vote after vote. But Pawlenty, who has national aspirations, may be under pressure from the National Republican Party to just hold it up and not sign. And I hope that doesn't happen because the law is very, very clear.
Well, you know it defeats pressure. Pressure.
You bet.
One last question
I'm a believer in that.
Mark Danner was just joining us here. He's the man who's published the CIA report on torture in CIA prisons. You're a member of the Judiciary Committee. Would you support a movement toward a Judiciary Committee-led investigation?
Well, I think the first place, look, I have some faith in Eric Holder and the Obama administration on this issue. The first day they said, okay, waterboarding is torture. We're not going to torture. And the most important thing they did is they extended the Army manual, which isn't bad, on these issues, to the CIA. So the first and logical place to do investigations, and look, if there are egregious violations of law, they should be prosecuted. I mean, President Obama has said, I know, but
we've got pretty great evidence at this point.
Innocent before proven guilty. But President Obama has said he doesn't want to spend all his time looking back, fair enough. But he has also said egregious violations of law should be prosecuted. The most logical, best place to start is the Justice Department itself. They haven't said whether they're going to do it or not. In fairness to them, they're just beginning to get staffed up because of all these holdbacks. If they won't do it, someone else is going to have to do it, but they should be given the first crack.
Senator Schumer, it's a real pleasure to have you on the show. I can't believe we haven't had you here before, but I'm really happy to have you here tonight. Thank you.
Thanks. Good to be here. Thanks.